Ethan and Laura, a seemingly perfect couple, embark on a luxurious business retreat to a private island. Beneath the paradise facade, Ethan uncovers a devastating betrayal, Laura's affair with her powerful client, William, and his audacious offer to borrow her for the weekend in exchange for money. Determined to expose the truth, Ethan meticulously gathers evidence, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. But as emotions boil over on the island's secluded shores, the clash spirals into chaos, leading to an irreversible and tragic ending. In a world where trust is shattered and vengeance reigns, Ethan's quest for justice comes at the ultimate cost. The private charter plane hummed steadily as it cut through the sky, ferrying us to a destination that promised an unforgettable weekend. My wife, Laura, sat beside me, scrolling through her phone with the kind of calm excitement that often came before new adventures. For her, this trip was a professional milestone, an opportunity to solidify her relationship with one of the firm's most important clients, William Fellows. For me, it was a necessary inconvenience. As we approached the island, the view from the window was nothing short of spectacular. A crescent of white sand cradled turquoise waters, while lush greenery framed the edges of a luxurious resort. I wanted to feel excited. Instead, an inexplicable knot of unease tightened in my gut. Laura's hand squeezed mine, snapping me out of my thoughts. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Can you believe this place? It's like a dream." I forced a smile. "Yeah, it's something." We touched down on a private airstrip, greeted by staff who whisked us away to our accommodations. William himself appeared on the veranda as we arrived, his presence commanding attention. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and exuded an effortless charm that seemed to set everyone at ease. Laura's enthusiasm was palpable as she introduced me to him, her laughter too easy, her gaze lingering a fraction too long. "Ethan, great to meet you," William said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his smile sharp. "I've heard a lot about you." "Likewise," I replied, though the words felt hollow. The weekend unfolded like a pageant of wealth and indulgence. Snorkeling in crystal-clear waters, feasts of fresh seafood, and evenings filled with laughter and music. Everyone seemed intoxicated by the opulence, everyone except me. William was a generous host, but there was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't just his confidence, it was the way he looked at Laura, like she was more than just an employee. I chalked it up to paranoia, the kind of overthinking that came from too much time spent in my head. The second night was when it happened. Dinner had been an extravagant affair on the veranda, the sound of waves crashing softly in the background. As the group dispersed, William caught my eye and gestured for me to follow him. "Ethan," he began, leading me to his study, "I wanted a private word." I followed reluctantly, stepping into a room that was every bit as grand as the rest of the island. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, and a decanter of whiskey sat invitingly on a mahogany desk. William poured 2 glasses and handed one to me. "To partnerships," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his and took a sip, waiting for him to get to the point. "Ethan, I admire your work," he began, pacing the room. "You're sharp, reliable, a man of integrity. That's rare these days." "Thanks," I replied, unsure where this was going. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "That's why I wanted to speak to you directly. I have a proposition." The air in the room seemed to shift. My grip on the glass tightened as I waited for him to continue. "I'd like to spend the rest of the weekend with Laura," he said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. I froze, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me?" "I'm willing to compensate you for the time she'd be away," he said, his eyes steady on mine. $100,000, transferred to your account by morning." My chest tightened as the words sank in. He wasn't joking. The calm, calculated way he spoke made that clear. "You're offering me money to loan you my wife?" I asked, my voice low. William smiled, unbothered by the accusation in my tone. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. She's been instrumental in our business dealings, and I'd like to show my appreciation in a more personal way. Rage boiled beneath my skin, but I forced myself to stay composed. Punching him might have been satisfying, but it wouldn't solve anything. Let me think about it, I said, the words tasting like bile. He nodded, as if he'd already won. Take your time. I'll have my assistant draft the transfer details, just in case. I left the study feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. My mind raced as I returned to our suite, where Laura was already preparing for bed. She looked up from her suitcase, her expression softening when she saw me. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile. Just tired. As she drifted off to sleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The conversation with William replayed in my mind, his audacity fueling my anger. But beneath the anger was something worse, doubt. His confidence, his casual assumption that I might agree, hinted at something deeper. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I navigated to Laura's email account. It wasn't the first time I'd crossed this line, but it was the first time I felt justified. Her inbox was a treasure trove of confirmations. Messages exchanged with William, playful and flirtatious, painted a picture I didn't want to see. Plans for the island trip, thinly veiled under professional pretexts, told me everything I needed to know. The final email was the nail in the coffin, looking forward to our time together on the island. My heart sank as I locked my phone and stared at the sleeping figure beside me. The woman I thought I knew had betrayed me, and now I had a choice to make. The sun was just beginning to rise when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let William or Laura dictate the terms of my life. If they thought they could humiliate me, they were sorely mistaken. I slid out of bed, careful not to wake her, and began making plans. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming the dignity they thought they could take from me. The game was on, and I intended to win. The morning sun streamed through the slatted blinds, casting fractured light across the pristine suite. I sat in the small seating area, staring at my phone as I pieced together my next move. Laura was still asleep, her breathing steady. She looked peaceful, serene even, but I couldn't let myself be fooled. Behind that facade was a betrayal that gnawed at my soul. I had always prided myself on being rational, composed, a man who could analyze a situation and respond accordingly. But this? This was uncharted territory. Laura stirred, her movements breaking the stillness of the room. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she looked at me the way she used to, warm, trusting. Morning, she said with a sleepy smile. I forced a smile in return. Morning. She stretched and got out of bed, padding toward the bathroom. I watched her disappear behind the door, my chest tightening. How long had she been lying to me? Weeks? Months? Years? By the time she emerged, dressed in a breezy sundress, I had managed to collect myself. What's the plan today? She asked, running a brush through her hair. I thought I'd stick around here and catch up on some work, I said casually. You should go enjoy yourself. Her eyes flicked to mine, a flicker of something, guilt, crossing her face before she smiled. That sounds good. Maybe I'll join the others for a swim. I nodded, already plotting my next move. Once she left the suite, I sprang into action. The first call I made was to my lawyer, Matt. A no-nonsense type who thrived on complex cases, Matt had handled some sticky situations for me in the past. Ethan, he said, his voice brisk. What's going on? I need you to help me secure evidence, I said, pacing the room. Emails, texts, anything that could corroborate infidelity. Matt hesitated. Is this about Laura? It is, I admitted. I need to be discreet, but I also need to be thorough. Can you do it? Of course. Send me whatever you have, and I'll start digging. But Ethan, are you sure you want to go down this road? I'm sure. The second call was to a private investigator I had worked with once before. Victor was a former cop, sharp and relentless. If anyone could uncover more details, it was him. Victor, it's Ethan Collins. I need your help. Collins, he said, his voice gruff. What kind of trouble are we talking? Marital, I replied. I'll send you what I've got. I need to know everything, where, when, and with whom. Consider it done. The rest of the day passed in a haze of subtle observations and silent rage. Laura returned to the suite around lunchtime, flushed and smiling. You should have come, she said, sitting beside me on the couch. The water was amazing. I nodded, feigning interest. Maybe tomorrow. She leaned over and kissed my cheek, and I resisted the urge to pull away. How could she act so normal, so loving, while carrying on this charade? That evening, William hosted another dinner, this time in the grand dining room. The air was thick with laughter and clinking glasses, the guests basking in the glow of luxury. Laura sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on my thigh. Across the table, William met my gaze, a knowing smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. It took every ounce of restraint not to wipe that smug look off his face. As the meal wound down, William rose to his feet, glass in hand. To good friends and even better partnerships, he said, his voice warm and commanding. It's been a pleasure hosting you all. Here's to many more successful ventures. The group raised their glasses, toasting to his toast. I followed suit, though the gesture felt hollow. After dinner, Laura excused herself to join a group headed for the beach. I lingered in the dining room, waiting until the others had dispersed before approaching William. William, I said, my voice steady. Can we talk? He turned, his smile widening. Of course, Ethan. Let's go to my office. I followed him down a corridor lined with expensive art, my heart pounding in my chest. Once inside, he gestured for me to sit. I take it you've had time to consider my proposal, he said, settling into a leather armchair. I nodded, leaning forward slightly. I have. And? I took a deep breath, schooling my expression. I need to know more. Why Laura? Why now? His smirk returned. Laura is a remarkable woman. Intelligent, beautiful, captivating. As for why now, opportunities like this don't come along often. My jaw tightened. And you thought throwing money at me would make it acceptable? I thought it might make things easier, he said, unbothered by my tone. This isn't personal, Ethan. It's business. Business, I echoed, my voice dripping with disdain. You think my marriage is just another transaction? William shrugged. We all make choices. You can either embrace the benefits or let your emotions cloud your judgment. I stood, towering over him. You have no idea who you're dealing with. His expression faltered, just for a moment, before he regained his composure. Think it over, Ethan. I'm a patient man. I left his office feeling both furious and resolute. This wasn't just about Laura anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and making sure neither of them would get away with this. The night stretched on as I finalized my plans. By morning, I would set the wheels in motion, ensuring that every lie, every betrayal, would come to light. William and Laura thought they held all the cards, but they were about to learn the hard way. Underestimating me was their first mistake. The next morning dawned bright and warm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Laura was still asleep when I slipped out of the suite, walking the length of the crescent-shaped beach with my thoughts swirling. Everything about this island screamed perfection, but for me, it had become a prison of deceit. I checked my phone, refreshing my emails. Nothing from Victor yet, though I knew he was meticulous and thorough. That was the only way to handle situations like this. Matt, on the other hand, had already sent over a few preliminary findings. The evidence I forwarded, Laura's emails, text threads, and even her travel records, had painted a clear picture of her betrayal. But now it was a matter of confronting her in a way that left no room for denial. I returned to the suite just as Laura was getting dressed. She smiled at me, oblivious to the battle raging within me. "Hey," she said, adjusting her earrings. "You were up early." "Just needed some fresh air," I replied, my voice steady. "Well, it's another full day," she said cheerfully. "William invited us on a boat tour this afternoon. You'll come, right?" "Of course," I lied. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Laura chatted happily with the other guests, laughing at jokes and making small talk. She looked radiant, the sunlight catching in her hair, but all I could see were the lies behind her smile. Finally, the boat tour began. A sleek yacht carried us along the island's coastline, its engines a low hum beneath the chatter of the group. Laura stood at the railing, her laughter carried on the wind as William regaled her with a story. I stayed back, nursing a glass of water and watching the scene unfold. William's charm was in full force, and Laura seemed completely captivated. It was sickening. It wasn't until later that evening, after another lavish dinner, that Victor's message arrived. I excused myself from the group, retreating to a quiet corner of the resort to read his findings. Victor didn't disappoint. His report was detailed, precise, and damning. He confirmed what I had suspected: Laura and William had been involved for months. Their rendezvous weren't just professional meetings, they were calculated, intimate encounters. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of photographs. There was Laura, her hand resting on William's arm, her smile brighter than I'd seen in years. There was no mistaking the chemistry between them. I stared at the images, my chest tightening. I had all the proof I needed. Now it was time to act. When I returned to the suite, Laura was already in bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, her expression softening. "Hey," she said. "Long day, huh?" "You could say that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She patted the spot beside her, and I reluctantly sat down. The bed felt like a chasm between us, the weight of her deception hanging heavy in the air. "You've been quiet," she said, tilting her head to study me. "Is everything okay?" I met her gaze, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But inside, I was anything but tired. I was calculating. Planning. The next morning, I made my move. I waited until Laura was out of the suite, likely off to meet William for one of their client discussions. Then I went to William's office, the flash drive containing Victor's findings burning a hole in my pocket. When I arrived, William was seated behind his desk, typing on his laptop. He looked up when I entered, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Ethan," he said, leaning back in his chair. "What can I do for you?" I didn't bother sitting. Instead, I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and placed it on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing it curiously. "Evidence," I said, my voice cold. "Emails, texts, photos. Everything I need to end this charade." His smirk faltered. "I don't follow." "Oh, I think you do," I replied, leaning forward slightly. "You thought you could manipulate me, treat my marriage like some kind of transaction. But you underestimated me, William. And now, you're going to pay for it." His expression darkened, but he said nothing. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I continued. "And I've secured copies of everything on that drive. If you think I'll let you get away with this, think again." William leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from smug to serious. "Ethan, this isn't what you think." "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want your excuses, and I don't want your money. What I want is for you to stay out of my life, and Laura's." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. If you so much as look at her again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your reputation, your business, it'll all come crashing down. I turned and walked out, my heart pounding. Confronting William was only the first step. The real challenge lay ahead, facing Laura. I returned to the suite, determined to confront her that evening. But when I arrived, she wasn't there. A quick glance at her phone, left carelessly on the nightstand, revealed a message from William. "Meet me at the Cove. We need to talk." The anger I had been holding back erupted like a storm. This wasn't over. Not yet. I grabbed my keys and headed out, my mind racing. It was time to put an end to this, once and for all. The Cove was quieter than I expected, shrouded in the fading light of dusk. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, but the beauty of the scene was lost on me. I parked the golf cart and walked down the narrow path toward the water, my steps heavy with purpose. I didn't know what I would find, but I was ready. For months, maybe years, I'd been blind to Laura's lies, trusting her unconditionally while she spun a web of deceit. Tonight, that ended. As I approached the secluded beach, I spotted them. Laura and William stood close, their figures silhouetted against the shimmering water. They were speaking in hushed tones, their voices indistinct but their body language unmistakable. She looked up at him, her expression pained, as he reached out to touch her arm. My heart pounded. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to confront them, to unleash the fury that had been building inside me. But something made me stop. They hadn't noticed me yet. I stayed hidden behind a cluster of rocks, watching as the scene unfolded. "You can't do this," Laura said, her voice breaking. "It's already done," William replied calmly. Laura shook her head, stepping back. "Ethan will never forgive me. And I can't live with that." "You don't need his forgiveness," William said, his tone persuasive. "You deserve to be happy, Laura. You deserve more than he could ever give you." Her silence was deafening. She turned away, staring at the horizon as if searching for answers in the endless expanse of ocean. "Please," she whispered. "Just leave me alone. This was a mistake." My chest tightened. Was this regret? Was she finally realizing the gravity of what she'd done? But then William's voice cut through the air, sharp and unyielding. "You knew what you were getting into. Don't back out now." Laura turned to him, her eyes blazing. "I never wanted this. You pushed me into it." Their argument escalated, the tension between them palpable. I stepped closer, unable to stay silent any longer. "Laura," I called out, my voice echoing across the cove. They both froze, turning toward me. Laura's face paled, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my anger barely contained. "That's rich. What are you doing here, Laura?" "With him." She took a step toward me, her hands raised as if to calm me. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't insult me," I snapped. "I know everything. The emails, the messages, the trips, it's all there. I've seen it." William stepped forward, his expression hardening. "This isn't the time or place for this, Ethan." "Shut up," I said, glaring at him. "You don't get to tell me what to do. You've already done enough." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I demanded. "Why throw away everything we built together?" She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. William stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't owe him anything, Laura." That was it. I lunged forward, shoving William back. He stumbled, his footing slipping on the uneven sand. "Ethan, stop. Laura screamed, rushing between us. But I wasn't done. You think you can just waltz into my life and take everything that matters to me? I shouted. You think I'll let you get away with this? William smirked, wiping sand from his hands. You're pathetic, he said. No wonder she wanted more. Something inside me snapped. I lunged at him again, fists flying. We grappled, our movements clumsy and fueled by rage. Laura screamed, trying to pull us apart, but her efforts were futile. Then it happened. William shoved me back with all his strength, and I stumbled, my foot catching on a jagged rock. I fell backward, the world tilting as I hit the ground. Pain shot through my head as it struck the edge of the rocks, and the sound of rushing water filled my ears. Ethan. Laura's voice was distant, frantic. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't obey. Warmth spread across the back of my head, and the edges of my vision blurred. Stay with me, Laura cried, dropping to her knees beside me. Please, stay with me. I wanted to speak, to tell her how much she had hurt me, but the words wouldn't come. The pain was fading now, replaced by a strange, numbing cold. William hovered nearby, his expression unreadable. We need to call for help, he said, his voice tight. Laura didn't respond. She cradled my head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, over and over. I'm so sorry. But it was too late. As the darkness closed in, the last thing I saw was her face, twisted with grief and regret. And then, there was nothing.